Hello guys, we're in the shop today. We're going to make a stand for a vise that I bought at Harbor Freight. This is a swivel vise that I bought. I'm going to unpackage it. I'm going to make a metal stand that rolls around. I'm going to show you how we do that today. I'm in the shop and y'all stick with me. I'm going to unpackage this thing and let y'all see what we're doing. Okay, I bought this a couple weeks ago at Harbor Freight. My son, I had one in the shop, but it was actually his, and we had it on a stand, and so he actually moved his shop. So what I'm doing is I'm going to, he took the old vise with him, but I still need one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox this one and show you what it looks like. These are a 5-inch swivel vise. If I can get it apart. We're going to mount this on a base. And once we mount it on a base, we'll be able to use it. It'll roll around the shop, and we can use it for different projects. Basically, it's got two sides. It swivels. It's got a side that'll hold pipe. It's got a side, of course, with the jaws. It's got a small anvil here on the back, and it can be adjusted with all the different pieces. It can swivel around the base. The base will mount to a top plate on our platform. I didn't need a big 6-inch jaw vise as much as I did one that would swivel to work in different positions. And this is the one that I chose to buy. I think I got it on sale for about 20% off. I think it was about $80, so I got it for about a little over $60 or so. Anyway, I've used this one in the past. It's exactly like the one that he had, and so it's not a bad vise if you need one for the shop. They're really handy. I haven't used the anvil part of it that much, at least not for something real heavy, because I didn't want to damage the housing. But it's a central machinery 5-inch multi-purpose vise, and I'm going to show you what we're doing with this thing. Turn you around here where you can see. So what I've got is I went out into my metal pile and I got a piece of 4-inch square tubing. It's got one end that's square, and I'll probably use that to mount the vise on. It's got another end that's got an angle on it. I'm going to cut it, but it's just a piece of 4-inch 4x4 square tubing. You don't have to go that heavy, but I'm making something that'll roll around that I can put some pressure on. And I'm going to have to cut this end off and make it square, and I'll cap it so that we can mount that vise on it. Also, for the base, I got some. This is some 3-inch square tubing, or 3-inch rectangle tubing. It's 3 inches by 1.5 inches. I think it's 14 gauge. It's not real heavy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a base, and I'm going to mount coasters on it. That way I can roll it around the shop, put it where I want to. And now I got the kind of coasters that do not lock down. I wanted the kind that didn't have the lock on them. You can use either kind you want, but I'm going to actually weld these onto here once I get to that point. So these are rated for 165 pounds. Let's see, 165 pounds, and I'm going to have 3 of them. So guys, when you're building something that you want to roll around, and if you can get by with it, and you're building in a single plane, what you want to do is you want to have 3 legs on that project instead of 4 if possible, unless you have a very, very flat surface to build that on, and you're very good. Because if you have 4, you'll always have a little bit of a wobble. But if you have 3, if you learn from 10th grade geometry, 3 points will always make a plane. And so I'm going to use a 3-point system, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So y'all stick with me on this. I'm going to set my 4x4 aside for right now, and we're going to focus on the base first. And a little bit of geometry on this thing. I'm going to point you down so you can see what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but I want to show you what we're doing on this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my carpenter square. I'm going to use a carpenter square. If you want to get really, really precise on something like this, you can get a lot more precise than what I will, okay? But I'm going to draw a line on my metal, okay? Now all that is a base line. Now I am going to want 3 legs on this platform, and I'm going to want those legs equidistant from each other. In other words, if you think about a circle that's a 360-degree circle, if you divide that circle by 3, you get 3 120-degree plane angles, okay? One here, and one over here, or one leg between each one with 3 legs. So how I do that with a carpenter square, I draw my line on here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you'll notice on your carpenter square, and I don't know if you can see this, but there are letters or numbers here on this long side. On the hypotenuse side, here's your right angle. Your hypotenuse side will have your angles. Okay, so from this angle right here to the very middle is a 45-degree angle. But what I want to do is, because I'm wanting to make 3 120s, I'm going to do a 60-degree angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I'm just going to lay my carpenter square. Remember, all I'm doing is I'm getting an angle. All I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my carpenter square, and here's my 60-degree angle right here, if you can see it. So I'm going to lay my angle down right here, okay? And if I went to a 45, there would be a 45-degree angle. You can see that 45 right there. But I'm going to go to the 60-degree angle because I want a 120-degree angle on the outside. So I'm going to go to a 60-degree angle, and all I'm doing is I'm keeping the point right here on the edge of this point right here. That's all I'm doing. And I'm going to go to my 60-degree point, and I'm going to make a mark. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but then I've got my mark, I've got my original line. I'm going to make a mark here, straight down, and I've sharpened my chalk. I'm using chalk instead of a pencil so you can see, but I've sharpened my chalk to a point to where I can really get a straight line there. So now what I've done is I've drawn a line here and a line here. Now all I have to do is make a crossing section corner to corner, and that gives me my 60-degree angle. So I'm going to go from that corner to that corner, hold my straight line, and that corner to that corner, draw me a mark, and I've effectively drawn an X on my metal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 4-inch cutoff wheel, and I'm going to cut this one out and this one out, okay? I'm just going to cut it out. But before I do that, I'm going to slide it this way a hair. I'm going to take my square. I'm going to do it this side so you can see. Take my square. See if you can see me here. Take my square. I'm going to line it up on that chalk mark. And I'm going to make me a line right here on this edge, okay? I'm going to take it. And I'm going to make me a line right here. I'm just using my square to get a straight edge, making me a line there, and I'm going to connect the line all the way around. So now I've got a line all the way around. I'm just going to measure from this line to that line, and look guys, it's 6 inches. It's 6 inches long. Go to the other side. I'm going to measure 6 inches. Take my square, make my line. Now I'm going to make sure of 6 inches. 6 inches. You got my 6 inches right there. Now I'm going to connect these dots. This X and this X. Now, the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to take my 4-inch grinding, my cutoff wheel. You'll see it right here. And I'll zoom you out, but I'm going to cut this line, this line, this line, and then flip it over and cut it the other side, okay? All right, I'm going to scoot that back just a hair, and I'm going to stand out of the way to the left of this thing so the sparks will fly and it won't hit me in my pants. I'm going to cut the lines out, okay? All right. First thing I'm doing is I'm just cutting, I'm scoring the line. Now I know where I'm going to cut. So I'm going to discard all this part here all the way. I'm not going to cut this line. I got to have this point. Let's cut it out. Now the reason I did that is so that when I do cut this, it'll be done right there on both sides. It'll be cut, and then I'll have this point left on my piece. Flip it over. I'm going to score this side here as well. When you're using a cutoff wheel, you always want to score your metal before you just cut it. That way you've got a straight line that you can see and you can work off of. Sometimes chalk or pencil or a mark will come off. And so now I've got a straight score on both sides, and I'm going to cut that out where I've scored it, okay? All right, there's that one. Cut this one. Okay, there's that half. And rotate it over. I'm going to cut this scored area out. Alright. Taking it. Now I've scored it. Now this is the part here that after I've made my 60-degree cuts, I can now discard this part, okay? There's my discarded part that I keep stuff like that. You never know what I might be able to use that for in the future. But right now we're going to throw it on the ground. I'm going to go from that line, and I'm going to go and I'm going to make a mark at 14 inches. But here's my 14 inches right there. Okay, now I'm going to go and I'm going to rotate that all the way around, line up my square, and I'm going to make me a line all the way around. I'm going to cut this one off square. So now I've got my line all the way across, all the way around. I'll put it out here over the edge, make it to where you can see it. And I'm going to cut this section off. Now remember, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run run it down the line so I can score it before I cut it. I'm not using gloves, but it'd probably be something that you probably ought to wear leather gloves on when you're using one of these cutoff wheels. But I am using my PPE, so I am keeping my eyes protected. You probably ought to, if you want, you can protect your ears, your eyes, your fingers. But I'm using this, usually I'm going to use this with 2 hands, so my hands aren't going to be in the way of these gloves. I won't need gloves because I'm not in the way of the wheel hitting my hand. So my first leg is basically, because I have this point on here, see how long it is. It's right at 17 inches long, okay? That's going to be my first leg. Then I'm going to cut 2 more that are only 14 inches long. So I'm going to mark this. 14. Same thing. I'm going to draw my line all the way around. So I'm going down here, I'm going to mark this one, 14. I've got my 3 legs cut, one has a point on it. Now let me show you what it's going to look like when we lay it out. Move this stuff all around. See if I can get you a look here. All right. So how we're going to do this is we're going to lay this, and I'm going to push this down. I'm going to weld these together. I'm going to weld these together. And there are my 3 legs. And if you went and you looked at this angle, with that being a 60-degree angle, this is a 120, a 120, and a 120. So you've got your 360-degree circle, you've got your legs, and then what I'll do is I'll end up welding these on here. That'll be my roll around. I'll weld those on there, and then I will have, basically it looks like a dolly. I'll turn it over, and then I'll weld my 4x4 on top of this, making it a complete stand. I'll put a plate on there and then weld this to the plate. That way it holds it all level, okay? That plate will strengthen it too, because you know you're going to put your foot on this and hold it so it won't roll. So let's go from there. So I'm going to take these rollers, put them to the side. So once I get this welded, I'm going to take and I'm going to weld a 6-inch plate on here, and that'll be my base for my stand, okay? Because this is a 6-inch, my stand will sit right in the middle of that, and then we'll have it good to go. If you notice, this thing's got a lot of rust on it, so I'm going to put on a flapper wheel and just knock the rust off this a little bit somewhere down here on the end, so I can get a ground clamp on here, and I'm going to go ahead and weld these things together. Tack them together, flip them over, tack them on the other side. So, but you're going to have to, for a MIG welder, that rust is a little bit difficult. So I'm going to take off my wheel, my cutoff wheel, and I've got a 60 grit flapper wheel, or sand disc wheel, whatever you want to call it. That's on. Now I can get a good arc and get this welded up. That's all flush. I'm going to tack. I'm just going to tack this in about 4 places. And I'll flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So we've got our MIG welder. I'm going to turn it on right here. And I am going to turn my gas on. Home. It's on C25 MIG steel. That's good. It's 75/25 argon CO2. That's good. Now I've got to change my wire diameter to 30 because I'm at 30, and I've got it set on 18 gauge thickness, which is plenty thick. I think it's really about 14 gauge, but you get plenty penetration without blowing through it on this kind of steel with the 18 gauge setting. So there's my setting for my MIG gun. Got the ground on here. One tack. There's another tack. I'm going to put this one a little better. Okay, I got my 2 tacks. Now that's that side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this one in, get it lined up, and now I'm going to weld or put me a tack right here and right there. Now I'll flip it over. See what I mean? It wanted to blow through right there with that 18 gauge setting. So I've got it tacked. All right, I'm gonna flip it over. Take my sanding wheel, because I still need to clean off this edge a little bit. I'm gonna clean one off down here. That'll be for the ground. Cleaned it off for the ground, okay? And I'm gonna clean off these edges here. Alright, so I've got it tacked up. As you can see, it won't go nowhere. It's all in one plane. It's all level as you can. Now if you put 4 legs on here, you're going to have one of these that's going to have a little bit of wiggle in it. So I'm using a 3-legged stand. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to weld these in. And then I'm going to grind them off smooth. Now I'm going to put my metal plate on this side because of that big gap. That's going to be my weak point, so I'm going to cover it with this metal plate so that I don't have such a weak spot, okay? Okay, there's that side. Put my safety glasses back on. I've got it pretty level. I'm going to find the center of this. I'm going to measure from here to the center, here to the center, and there to the center, okay? So in order to find the center of something, get you a straight edge, point to point, draw you a line, point to point, draw you a line. There's your center, and it's going to be real close. Now, what I've got to do is I've got to find the center here. Go straight down the middle of that to right there. There's that one. Straight down the middle of this one. And then this one should be pretty close. Straight down the center from there. All I've done is I've taken a straight edge and I've laid it in the center of the leg and right to the center of this V, and I drew a line. I did it here, I did it there, and I did it there. Okay? I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to find how far. It should be 3 inches. So 3 inches. 3 inches from this center point is where my center point of my plate ought to be. 3 inches. Ooh, that's hot. 3 inches and 3 inches. All right, there are my center points. So I can go there. And then all I do is I square this around with this, and that should lay it out. Center point and center point. It's ready to tack on, guys. It's all tacked on. Now that ain't going to come off. That's going to be my base, which supports my legs that my stand will sit on. Okay? That's where it's going to end up being, alright? But I'm going to go ahead and weld this on. Alright, that one's welded on. There's my base for my stand. It's hot on that side. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to weld up this side here and get that welded up. Let's see, I'm going to turn this because I have the place where my ground goes right here. Okay, got that one done. So I'm going to stick this wheel over here like this, and I'm going to make this parallel with the outside, just like that. See how my wheel is touching my square? It's parallel, so it's gonna sit in here a little ways. Now, I'm gonna take my square and lay it on here, make sure it's on here square, and this one's ready to tack up. Okay, I've got it square on here, my base. I'm just gonna hold it in the middle, put me a tack right here. And I'm going to put a tack over here. And I'm going to put a tack over here. Let's go ahead and weld this thing on. There's that one. Now I'm not going to weld all the way around that thing in case I ever want to cut it off. If I break one of these, I can just cut that off, that weld, and one on this side, and that'll be plenty to hold it. But if I ever do cut it, I can always just change out the wheels by removing this bolt. But I don't want to weld it all the way around. It's just too much grinding if you have to cut it off. All right, we got that one welded on. There's your first one. Move this one around. Let's do this one. There's that one. Now we've got our base. Let's flip it back over, and remember it's still probably red hot. I'm going to take my 4x4, and I've got this one funky angle. I'm going to square this up and cut this off so that I can use it to weld right here on my plate. What I've got the base. I'm going to do the 4x4. I'm going to weld that on here next. I'm going to get that centered, and then I've got a square base, and then I'll put a plate here, and that's what I'll mount my vise to. Now if you notice, get you like this, if you notice, this thing is up to about my waist high. The vise will be about this high right here. So maybe a little high, but I don't mind it a little high. I just don't want it to be up in my face when I'm grinding and cutting, okay? I'm going to bring it up here on the table, and I'm going to weld it to the base. There's my base. Let me see if you guys can see what I'm doing here. Yeah, there's my base. All right, all I'm going to do is I'm going to set my 4x4 right here. I'm going to center it on my base. Remember, it's a 6-inch base. It's a 4x4, so I should have an inch on each side. But I've got the X marked on my plate, so all I've got to do is line that corner up with that X, this corner up with this X, and the other two should be lined up, and they are, and that one is ready to tack up. Let's get our ground on there. Put my reading glasses back on. Put the reading glasses back on, get my helmet on. Now when you weld something like this, guys, you want to just tack it down on two sides, on this side and on the other side, and maybe on 3 corners or 4, that way it doesn't rock. There's 1, 2, 3. Now then, it's tacked on my base, and it won't move. But I'm gonna go ahead and weld this thing up. I guess I can turn it around to where you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna weld this side down. Okay, there's one side. Turn it. Let's weld this other side. That one. It's there. Okay guys, so I found me a piece of 1/4-inch thick plate. I'm going to make it the size that I need, and then I'm going to knock some of the paint off of it. And sometimes in the past you could just weld this thing onto your plate. But I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to bolt mine on in case I have a problem with my vise. I can take my vise off and go buy another one. So I'm just going to get this thing centered on my vise. I tried a 6x6 plate, and it just was not quite, it wasn't quite big enough. So I'm going to put my vise on here, and I'm just going to square it up on here, and I'm going to make a mark so I can cut it off with my cutoff wheel. I can't get my chalk down in the bolt holes, so I'm just going to make a circle on each bolt hole, because I'm going to have to take this to the drill press and drill it out. And so I can see my circle on each one of these. I've got my mark. I'll go ahead and take my square. That's where I want to cut it off. Cut it off square right there. I don't mind that hole's in there. It's going to be covered up with the base. No big deal. But what I'm going to do is, I use these self-tappers. These are great bits. They'll drill about an 1/8 inch hole, but they're great for plate. They're great for any kind of sheet metal. But they're great to save on your bits. So I'm going to make a pilot hole in the middle of each one of these using... Okay, so I've got a pilot hole. They make a great bit for a pilot hole. Okay. Save me just a few bits over there when I'm working on the drill press. So I'm going to take you over there with me, okay? Okay, I'm over here at my drill press, and I am going to start with, I'm just going to use a bit to step up a little bit from where I was. What I need to do is I need to spray that with some lubricant. Let it cut. Just go slow when you're doing this. That way you don't burn up your bit. This is pretty soft metal. There's that one. Okay, so there's my 3 holes. I've got them. I'm going to go check to see if they'll line up with my vise, and then I'm going to cut my line here, cut that off, and that'll be my plate for the top of my platform. Okay, so I've got my plate. I can still see my line, a small line right here, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that. Again, that oil that I used on it, that PV blaster, took my line off. So I'm going to go ahead and score my line like I did before with my end grinder, or my cutoff wheel on my end grinder. Make sure you put your safety glasses on, guys. Score the line first so you'll have a line. Okay. Now make sure you stand back, and that way it doesn't throw it on you. Cut to the side, okay? Make sure you cut to the side. Okay, now then, got that clamped on. Okay guys, so I have my plate cut off. Now, there's easier ways to do that. I just didn't want to drag out my cutting torch before I mount my vise. I'm going to weld my plate onto my platform. So double check that, make sure it would work. Go ahead and mark the top real quick with my chalk. Top. So I've got my platform right here. What I'm going to do is I am going to mount this right on the platform. I'm just going to center it. I'll weld this to the platform, then I'll bolt my vise to this. and then I'll have a roll around platform. I've got it centered on here. I'm gonna go ahead and put my ground on. Okay guys, I got you set up at a little bit different angle. I've got my plate sitting on here, and I've drawn the 4x4 square on it. I've got it laid out on here to where I can tack it down, get it square on there, tack it down. I think that's pretty close right there. Okay, and so I'm just gonna put a tack here, a couple of tacks, and when I do that, that's gonna then I'll flip it upside down. I'll move you up to the table and you can see it. I don't want to have to weld this thing upside down. Not that I can or that I can't, it's just that it's a lot easier if you just do it the other way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a tack. Put a tack. Put a tack. Put a tack. Okay, I got my tack, got it tacked on. Now I'm gonna I'm just gonna put it up on the table, weld it up there. So I won't put pressure on it, I'm hanging it over the edge. I'm gonna weld this side, and then I'm gonna weld that side. Okay, I've got that side welded on. I'm gonna rotate it over. What are you doing, Lego? What are you doing, Lego? Don't touch that with your nose, it's hot. Okay, now I'm gonna weld this side and this side. Okay, there's that side. Okay, got those two sides welded up. Okay, there's that side. That's all done. I tried to find some that were plastic that I could just push in and they'd be done, but I didn't have any luck doing that, so I bought a couple of little plates, some plates for these so I can just weld them, then I'll grind the top smooth. I ain't gonna worry about the edges. Knock that off. That one's good to go. Alright, there's that one. Got that one done. Now then let's think about this one here. Top. Got it ready. Same thing. Put it on. The weep hole towards the bottom. Alright, got that one done. Okay, that one's on. I got all three of those done. Now let's stand it up. I think I'm done with the welding. I've got my grinding rock on my 4-inch grinder. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grind these off smooth. Okay guys, I've got it all done. Now, I bought some gray paint that I can put on this thing. I may slap some on here before I... Let me show you what I got here. So I've got my platform welded on top. I've got it on 3 legs with coasters. I've got the legs capped. I've got it all, and it just rolls around real well. So now I can move it around the shop and take it wherever I need to. And that's going to be my platform for my 5-inch 360 vise. I'm going to go with some paint, roll it out in the yard and do a little painting. And you guys don't have to see me for that, but I'll bring it back in and then we'll hook up the vise on it. I slapped a little bit of paint on it, and so we've got our stand all ready. We're ready to mount. We're ready to mount the vise on here. Okay, so we've got our vise on here. Need to get some 3/4 inch wrenches and lock it down. So take my little hanger that I have, and I'm going to get my 3/4 inch wrench off of here. Now, so what I'm doing is I'm putting a lock nut on and a regular nut. I've got a 1/2 inch bolt that I put in, and I am going to secure this to the top of my stand. I wanted a stand that I could roll around anywhere in the shop that I needed it at the time, because I do projects all over. And I wanted one a certain height so that I wanted one up on here a certain height so that I could use it on my projects for YouTube. I wanted one so if I was cutting on it, it wasn't so high. The other one was about this high. And so when I was using my grinder, a lot of times it was throwing sparks right in my face. Well, this one is probably at the top of it. Let me see. At the top of this one is 4 foot tall right at the top of it. So it's real. I'm 6 foot tall, so it's really handy for you know, mounting. I can swivel it. I can use it however I need to do the projects that I'm working on. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to put a lock nut and a lock washer and a nut on each side. All I'm doing is I'm tightening up these bolts so that my stand will this one's a little bit tight. There's that one. So this vise is a 360 vise. I can swivel the top, I can swivel the jaws, and it ought to really come in handy for the projects that I do. It'll hold pipe, it'll hold square tubing, plate, anything. Definitely want to make sure you keep your vices oiled. They will tend to rust up, especially the exposed metal places in your shop. You want to keep those to where they're good and oiled. Spray some WD-40 or some PB Blaster or something on them. Tighten this side up here. Push this one through, tighten that side up to where it doesn't swivel. And then there we go. Okay, that's it, guys. So I've got my vise set. Now, what's handy about it, I've got 3 legs on the bottom. I'll back up so you can see. Got the 3 legs on the bottom, so those 3 wheels will always be in a plane, and so it rolls around really good in the shop. And if I need to use it and I need it stable, all I do is just stick my foot on one of these legs and hold it still. I'm usually not going to pry or do anything. I'm usually just holding it to cut something or holding it to grind on something. But I'm usually not doing a lot to it in order for it to that I'm going to need to really bear down and try to bend something. If I do that, I'm going to use a torch and heat it as it's holding it, and then I'll heat it and bend it. But that's what you usually vise for. You don't tend to, or most people won't tend to do this. You know, they won't tend to use a vise and then try to break a jaw by bending something real thick without heating it up. I'm going to go get a little bit of grease, put on a rubber glove, and I'm going to go ahead and put some grease on my slide and on my top and on my jaws. Got my old grease gun here. I'm just going to put a little grease on it. Now, I was at my buddy's house the other day, Mike, and he had a grease gun that was one of these battery operated grease guns. Guys, we were greasing up his tractor, and that thing was excellent for, it worked really excellent. I'm gonna have to get one. That's another next thing my wife's always saying, don't you have enough tools? Well, the electric grease gun, if you use one very often, it sure will save you some time. These things right here, these old grease guns, boy howdy, they sure can be nasty. But like I say, I'm just gonna grease up my exposed metal here on my slide. Now let's work it in. Try to keep it off my handle. This one's a 5-inch vise, but it'll extend a little bit farther. Go back here, put a little bit more on it. Doesn't take much, just enough to cover up the slide. I know one thing, you get next to it, it'll get it all over your shirt. So mine's got a ruler right here on top of it. Let's see if I can rotate it over. See the ruler right here on top? So I'm not going to grease my ruler, but I am going to rotate it around so I can grease the bottom. Now it's also got, I'll see if you can see this, it's got a screw inside here. I'm going to put a little grease on it, run it back and forth a little bit. Main thing is I'm just going to try to keep it greased so it doesn't rust up on me. Go ahead and that ought to be good on the grease. Now I'm going to go put some oil on these silver places. And I'm going to coat the silver parts on top, just because if you don't, they're gonna end up being they're gonna be a mess if you don't. They're gonna rust up on you. All right, so I got some PV Blaster here. I'm just going to spray some on a rag, and I'm just going to oil the top, and I'll oil the jaws of my vise. Put a little on there. You can use WD-40, you can use 3-in-1 oil, you can use a little bit of motor oil. Doesn't matter what it is, just so you coat it a little bit. And then you want to coat these jaws on the bottom too. You can see how they're cast, and so you want to make sure those don't rust up on you. And that ought to have it. Now guys, a lot of people will mount their vise on a table. I chose A lot of people will mount their vise on the table, but I chose to put mine on a stand because that way I can move it around. I can take it out of the shop. If it's mounted on a table, it's in one location, and I have to figure out how I'm going to use it in that location. But with this thing being on a roll around stand, I can use this thing anywhere in the shop. I can use it out in the yard. I can use it on a project in town. Anything I need to do, this little thing will work for me. So that is what that's why I put it on a stand. I had never had one on a stand before, the one that my son took with him when he left. And when he took it, I've really missed it a lot on some of the projects that I could have been using it on when I'm working out here in the shop filming. But now I've got me a new one. And guys, Harbor Freight 5-inch 360-degree swivel multi-angle vise. I think I paid $66 for it after I got a 20% off discount. But Harbor Freight is excellent. I use my Vulcan 220 welder to weld my stand. This is just some old 4x4 tubing that I had with some 3-inch tubing I use for legs, and I bought the casters, the 3 casters, for about $5 each at Harbor Freight. They hold 165 pounds each. So that's my project for this week. Guys, make you a vise stand. You won't regret it. It'll come in handy in the times when you think, golly, I wish I just had an extra hand. Here it is. Guys, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thank you, guys.